men. If you're receiving this, if you're watching this video, it's because you're a man who is connected to one of the churches that are part of Kindred House, and this is something that we're going to be doing every other month now for the foreseeable future, is some sort of teaching and encouragement and strengthening for us as men right across the board for Kindred House. And I'm very excited about this. I love talking to men and the idea of being a man and being a strong man. And then, of course, being a strong husband and father. These things are very dear to me, and I believe they're dear to the Heavenly Father as well. So we're going to take some time over this next little bit, and we're going to talk about being a man. And it won't just be me doing sessions. It'll be some of the other men from the apostolic team and maybe some others who will come in and share with us and encourage us and strengthen us in being men across Kindred House. And I believe if we look in the world today, many of the ills, many of the challenges, many of the societal problems that we face, you can look and think it's because there wasn't a godly man, there wasn't a godly husband or a godly father who was able to bring change. And so I think that that's one of the things that God is restoring to the earth through the church is godly men, godly husbands, godly fathers. But it begins with the house of our own life. And if you're a part of Kindred House, hopefully you've seen our 4 pillars video and maybe some of our other teachings, but where I talk about unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor in vain. And we spend some time talking about the house of our own life, the house of the family that we're joined to, our wife and kids, if we have those yet, and then the family of the house of God, and about God building the house. And a little while ago, I was reading in Proverbs chapter 24, which I'll read to you now, and it just says this, Proverbs chapter 24, verse 3, by wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. And then a few verses down in verse 13, and there's lots of verses like this, but it says this, eat honey, my son, for it is good. Honey from the comb is sweet to your taste. But know also that wisdom is sweet to your soul. If you find it, there is a future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off. And this speaks, of course, about the importance of getting wisdom and walking in wisdom. And it's by wisdom that a house is built. And it's by wisdom that the house of our life is built, by wisdom that the house of our family is built, and I believe by wisdom that the household of God that we're joined to here at Kindred House is being built. So today I want us to take a look. We're just going to look at one scripture, and we're going to look at what many people call 3 wise men, or the story of the Magi. There weren't necessarily 3, but we're going to look. So let's have a look at Matthew chapter 2 together, and I'm going to read these 12 verses for us. I'm reading from the NIV. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi, or the other translations say wise men, from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them, where the Christ was to be born, In Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will be a shepherd of my people. When Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star appeared, he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and make a careful search for the child, and as soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and incense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. All right, this is a tremendous story. It's often a story that we hear at Christmas, but it's a story, of course, of these wise men visiting Jesus. And When you think of a manger, many of the manger scenes actually have, even though it took these guys a few years to get there, a lot of the manger scenes have often three wise men there with Jesus. But that wasn't the case. It was a few years afterward, and we don't know how many there were, but these wise men. And so we're going to look at some characteristics of what it means to be a wise man. And because by wisdom, the house of my life, by wisdom, the house of my family, and then by wisdom, the household of God is built. By wisdom is established. And we want to be men and women we want to be men. We don't want to be women. We want to be men who are wise and who build wisely. And so I think there are some characteristics here that we can see in these wise men that I think that we can learn from. The first one is this, that wise men recognize the supernatural. They recognize when God wants their attention. They look at there were men who were wise, and they were wise in the wisdom of the world. But something supernatural happened. And that can be challenging for many of us who have, sharp minds, who like to be good thinkers, who are cerebral. It can be a challenge. And I've encountered many men that like this, who are so cerebral. They're so locked up sometimes in their own mind that they actually can't perceive the supernatural. They're not attuned in their spirit because their mind is so sharp and their mind is so strong that they can find themselves being led primarily and often solely by their mind to the point that they don't actually recognize when God is trying to get their attention or when God is speaking to them. They don't recognize supernatural activity. And that's not the kind of men that we want to be, is it? We want to be wise men who, of course, are cerebral, who think things through, but we recognize that we're first and foremost spiritual. And so wise men recognize the supernatural. Wise men recognize when God is moving supernaturally and trying to speak to them and get their attention. The second thing is wise men seek Jesus. And these men, they saw this star and they didn't just think about it and ponder it and wonder what it was about and maybe get together in groups and talk about it and then that was it. They actually sought Jesus. They got up from where they were. They weren't passive observers. And this is a challenge, of course, for all of us as men, is that we can, tip into passivity and just simply observing. And even in the church and in church life, we can find ourselves wanting to just observe and just be passive. And that's not wisdom. That's not what wise men do. Wise men pursue Jesus and they get up from where they are. And they would have had to align. I don't know how long it took them to get there. It looks like it took them a very, very long time. They would have had to realign their entire lives because of the pursuit of Jesus. And I think that is a picture for us, of course, of wisdom and what wise men do. Is wise men align their lives. They allow the pursuit of Jesus to affect their Monday and their Tuesday and their Wednesday. They allow it to affect what they're doing and how they're doing it because wise men seek him. Wise men pursue what God is doing. These men, in order to do this, they would have had to consider the cost. It would have cost them, I'm sure they had jobs, I'm sure they had other things that they could be doing, but this would have been a costly venture for them. And they considered the cost and still considered the pursuit of Christ and the pursuit of the supernatural thing that God was doing on the earth was worth it. And so they aligned their lives at great expense, at their own cost, and they allowed it to affect, like I said, their weeks, their days, their months, because they were pursuing. It would have cost them time, it would have cost them energy, it would have cost them money, it probably cost them some friends, because they had to get up and move. And I'm sure there were friends who didn't understand or didn't agree, but they still pursued. And they pursued and aligned their lives, and that's what wisdom does, and that's what wise men do. And I want us to be men like that. I know that we are men who are endeavoring to pursue Jesus and allow the pursuit of Jesus to affect every area of our life. Another thing that wisdom does is these men were okay with uncertainty. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know when they would find him. They didn't know even necessarily what they were going to find. They just had enough knowledge They had seen enough of the light of the star that they knew to pursue him. And that's it. And they were okay with uncertainty. And that can be a challenge for us as men. As we pursue the Lord, as we step out into all the things that God's calling us to do now as kindred men, there's uncertainty. There's things that we don't know. What's everything going to look like? And there can be a tendency in men that I know of that unless everything's certain, unless the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, we don't want to move. But we are the church, and the church is led by the mutually discerned voice of the Lord. And so when God does something, when God speaks, we move even in times of uncertainty, even if we don't know exactly how it's all going to end or where it's all going to lead us. That's the excitement. That's the pursuit. That's the romance, if I can put it that way, of pursuing Jesus and there being uncertainty. And for these men, these wise men, they had to make a major adjustment, but then they would also have to every day make minor adjustments to their lives. So the major adjustment was, okay, we're getting up and we're going to pursue Jesus. And then the minor adjustment would have been every morning or every evening, they would look and see, okay, the star's over here. So now we have to navigate it this way. And I'll tell you a story real quick. Many years ago, I had just got a boat, and I had never owned a boat before. And this was, I called it a boat. You know, it was very small and in very rough shape, but it ran. And I traded it in a car deal, and so it ran. And so first thing I did is I hopped in with two friends, and we started going. And there was going to be the easy way or the long way, and to get to where we wanted to go. And we start going, and I go under this bridge, and I didn't know anything about boats. I'd never had a boat before. I go under the bridge, and I didn't realize that under bridges, you're not supposed to go fast, that there's a no wake zone. And I didn't know that, so I'm full tilt right on through under the bridge. And of course, on the other side of the bridge, there's a beach that's filled with people. And in front of the beach, there are police in boats. Or in a boat. And so I come flying through, and immediately they look over at me, and they're like, boop, they put on their lights, and they put on the thing, they call us over. So I'm like, okay, I got to go over there. Well, I'd never driven a boat before, and I didn't know that they don't quite stop exactly like a car does. And so I go in full tilt, come in hot, and then I come off the throttle. And thankfully, by the grace of God, it looked like I was a professional, because we came up right alongside perfectly, and I easily could have just smashed them. But somehow I got up alongside them, and the cop, and it just bothered my flesh a little bit. He was my age, and he's like, well, son. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. Called me son. And he's like, well, son, today we're looking for liquor and for life jackets. And I was like, well, Dad, you'll be happy to know that we don't have either. And I thought that was funny. He didn't find it funny. And I got a lot of fines that day. And I learned a lot. And then afterwards, we set out. He let us go. We set out to go to where we were going to go, and there was the long way or the short way, and we're like, well, let's just take the short way. The problem was the short way was right across the center of the lake, and the boat was not very big, and so we start going, and next thing you know, these waves start coming over, and we get about 3 waves in, and I'm looking, and there's like this much water at the bottom of the boat, and I'm like, we got like 2 more waves until we're done. And so I turn, I'm like, guys, we're going the long way, and the long way was very long, and where we needed to go, we had a pretty good idea of where we needed to go. So we're talking by this point, and we just kind of open it up and are going. And next thing you know, half an hour goes by, and we're approaching where we need to be. And I realized that we are nowhere near where we need to be. We had missed it by miles, literally. And what had happened was, at the beginning, I had pointed the boat. This is where we're going, and then got talking, and then just got like enjoying the fact that we were on a boat and talking about the cops. And next thing you know, I had missed it by I aimed once, and then I didn't continue to aim. And afterward, the Lord spoke to me about that. One, about responsible boat ownership, respecting authority figures, etc. But also about it wasn't enough for me to point once and say, this is where I'm going to go, and now I'm going to look at things around me. I had to continually keep focus on the destination, and I had to live in the immediate in light of the ultimate. That's what God spoke to me about, is that if we don't regularly look at the ultimate, look at Christ, look at where we're going, and do these micro adjustments every day, that I can give my life to Jesus. I can say I'm going to go to church, I'm going to be a believer. But if then I just begin with my head down, living my own life, I can find myself miles from where I wanted to be. And I would have never chosen to be there, but it's because I daily didn't readjust and realign. And that's a long story. It's a long way of saying that we are men who are wise, and because we're men who are wise, we're given to readjustment. We're given to daily allowing him to adjust our lives so that we are in alignment with the pursuit of Christ. All right. The next thing, I'm going to move quickly here. The next thing that they did, as you know, they upset King Herod. And it didn't upset them to upset King Herod. Wise men are okay at upsetting the natural order of things and natural things to pursue supernatural things. In order to be wise in the kingdom of God, we will have to be prepared to upset the spirit of this age, which is prevalent and has even tried to encroach, as you know, into the church. There's the spirit of the age that in order for us to be men and to be godly men and to lead our homes well, we can't be afraid that we're going to upset some systems and structures that are motivated by the spirit of this age, and that's going to be okay, and we're going to have to be okay with that. The next thing, which I find remarkable here, is as you read through the story, he gathered all the scribes, all of the chief priests, all the important people that had the word, and they come, and he gathers them, and they talk about it all, and then they leave, and they don't go with him. The scribes, the Pharisees, the chief priests, all the Bible people, all the word people, they were so obsessed with the letter of the law, they missed the Rhema word. They missed what God was doing. And they didn't actually go with the Magi, which I find remarkable, because if the Magi are like, okay, we think we know where Christ is, we know where this king is going to be born, it would have been these religious priests who would have thought, wow, this is fantastic. This is the culmination of all that we've studied for all of our life. The Messiah is being born. And because they were so cerebral and so locked up in their own thinking, they were the type that would, and unfortunately, I've encountered some men like this that are so, they would rather argue about doctrine. They would rather just think about things, and they'd rather get into a fight about something, and are so obsessed with every T being crossed and I being dotted and every jittle and tot, so to speak, that they actually miss what God is doing. They miss the Rhema word. They miss the beckon of the living Christ, the living word, to say, come with me. And they end up staying and arguing. Meanwhile, those who are wise leave and pursue, and they encounter Christ. And that's what wisdom does, and that's what wise men do, is, of course, we believe in doctrine, we believe in understanding, but we don't spend our time arguing. We don't get involved with, all the online chatter and all the noise, and we don't weigh in with all of our opinions on everything, because that's just carnal, and it can be fleshly. So we're men who are moved by the Spirit. We, of course, have sharp minds, but as you've heard me say many times, our mind is a tremendous servant, but it's a bad master. And we can't be led by our mind. We can't be led by our emotions. Great servants, but bad masters. We're led by the Spirit of God. And in order to be led by the Spirit of God, it's our spirit man who hears the word of the Lord, who hears the voice of the Lord. All right. Wise men keep moving. They don't get stuck. And that's what happened to these Pharisees and Sadducees and the chief priests. They got stuck in their doctrines. They got stuck in their arguments. They got stuck in their belief systems, so much so that they couldn't recognize the forward momentum of what God was doing. All right. The next thing that wise men do, these men rejoiced in the sight of the star. They were happy to pursue. They found the true joy of actually pursuing Christ. And that's where real joy is. The place of true joy is in the pursuit of Christ. That really is it. That's the place of real fulfillment and real joy of all the other things that the world has to offer, of all the other things that we could give our time and energy, our attention to. The real fulfillment is in the pursuit of Christ. That's where real joy. It says, they were overjoyed. Some translations say. When you get away from the pursuit of Christ, you become unfulfilled and you become unhappy. And there's many men I know who've become unfulfilled and become unhappy because they've come away from the passionate pursuit of Christ. And then they find themselves unfulfilled and unhappy, so they look for other things to fulfill them. And they look for other ways, other things to bring them happiness. And that's where the enemy can get in. That's where the world can get in. That's where the flesh can get in, because that's all a bait and switch. It promises fulfillment and leaves emptiness. But like I said, real joy, real fulfillment is found in the passionate pursuit of Christ. Let me just say a couple of things on that. For men, it can be a challenge to, if we get off of pursuing Christ as a person, as our first and primary passionate pursuit, then we look to fill it with other things. And sometimes it's sinful things, but not always. Sometimes it's just things that are important. They're just not meant to be the first. So things like our family, things like our wife, or even our kids. And the kids and all of their schedules and all of their, hockey or whatever, whatever sports they're in and music they're in and all the things that they do, we can quickly, if we're not careful, substitute our family for a position that God himself is jealous of. He wants to be that which we think about the most. He wants to be that which we pursue. That we spend the most time and energy is pursuing Christ. And that actually is the healthiest thing for our kids, is of all the things we can give our kids, Sarah and I can, if we can demonstrate a mother and father who are passionately pursuing the King. We don't get everything right. We make lots of mistakes, but our kids will be able to look and see that mom and dad passionately pursued Jesus above all else. And that is, I think, is important for us all to be able to demonstrate in our homes that we passionately pursue Jesus above all else. Men often can find themselves then also making a God not just of their family, but if they're not passionately pursuing Jesus, making a God of work. And where work ends up being the place that you look to find the most fulfillment. And you look to draw identity and you look to draw fulfillment from your place of work. And God is jealous of that. He wants to be that. He wants to be the place where we draw fulfillment. He wants us to delight in him so that he can give us the desires of our heart. He can provide for us those desires. Last thing I'll say on this, and this is purely anecdotal and observational, but I've seen many men who have lost the passionate pursuit of Christ. And like I say, some get into sin, and that's terrible. But for many others, it's family, or for many others, it's work, or for many others, it's leisure. And it can be the pursuit of comfort and the pursuit of leisure, and whatever form leisure takes. Whether it's golf or sports or video games or whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. Obviously nothing wrong with work, nothing wrong with family. But they're all meant to be prioritized. And these wise men demonstrate for us the right priorities, is that we prioritize the pursuit of Christ, and everything else finds its fit in there. And we look to find, they rejoiced, they were overjoyed when they saw the star. That the pursuit of Christ is where real fulfillment is. All right. When they saw the star, they eventually moved on from the star, because the star was a sign. And when they got to the star, they eventually moved on from the star, because the star was a sign. But it wasn't actually Jesus. They didn't focus on the star once Jesus was there. The star was there to lead them to Jesus, but Jesus was that which they were seeking. They didn't become star followers. They were Christ pursuers. And why I say that is we can often find ourselves being given to all the things around Christ, but not actually Christ himself. And so that's things like being given to the activities of the church, being given to the church, being given to meetings, to ministries, to our own calling, to our own worship or to music or to events or to meetings or to being given to the culture around the church. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. Those things are simply meant to lead us into an encounter with a person. And that's even true when it comes to our personal disciplines, our own reading of the word, our own quiet time. Those things are wonderful, but there's no value in them in and of themselves. The only value is that these are a conduit to bring us into a relationship, to bring us into an encounter with a living person, with the Jesus who is alive. And this star was simply a conduit to bring them into an introduction to Jesus. And a lot of the things that we have, whether it's the rhythm and the routines, whether it's the stuff around the church, the meetings and the gatherings and all that kind of stuff, all these things are around Jesus, but they're there to help further facilitate a deeper encounter with a living and active person. So let's not get distracted by all the things around him and spend more of our time given to that and not enough time actually pursuing that there's a real living and active Jesus. That's what wisdom is. And that's what wise men do. And wise men, then, the next thing that they did is when they saw Jesus, they worshiped. Wise men worship. And I've had to develop that as a culture in my life. And if you know me, you've heard me talk about that. It didn't come worshiping, and whether it's worship in heart and a life of sacrifice, or even just like worshiping in my own walk with the Lord and learning to sing and make music in my heart. None of that kind of stuff came naturally to me. I was more of the cerebral type, and would love to talk about doctrine or write an essay or something like that. But as you've heard me say many times, lots of the Bible taught me about God, but it's the Psalms that have taught me to walk with him, and to really worship him. I wonder, they were all right with the fact that it probably wasn't exactly what they expected. I wonder what they were expecting. They had heard that he was a king, and a king was being born, and they come and they're like, I heard he was born in a manger. I heard his parents weren't even married. There was obstacles that they had to get over in order for them to actually just say, no, this is clearly Jesus. And they weren't going to allow any of these other things that were unexpected to distract them from the fact that they've come encounter with who would have been a toddler by this point, a young child. And they worshiped. And when they worshiped, then the next thing they did, it says that they opened their treasures and gave gifts, and they gave the most precious gifts. And that's what wisdom does. When we encounter Christ, both once, but also ongoing on a daily realignment basis, we offer to him our deepest treasures. We offer to him our most precious things. All of our, we offer him our time and our skills and our abilities and our resources, our finances, our gifts, the talents and abilities that he's given to us. When we encounter Christ once, but when we encounter him on a daily basis, a wise response is to worship him and to open up from the deepest treasures and say, Jesus, I want you to have the best of me. I want you to have not the leftovers at the end of the month or that you have leftovers at the end of the day. I want to give you the best of everything that I can offer. And that's what they did. They gave him the best. They didn't give him, like I said, the leftovers. They gave him the absolute best of what they could give. Okay, lastly, we're wrapping up here now. Wisdom, then, and wise men are protective of the body of Christ. Because they were warned in a dream, and they thought, well, if we go back that way, Herod is going to find out where Jesus is. And we are protective of this little boy. We're protective of this body. So they went about a different route, and they went home a different way. And wise men are protective of the body because there is an enemy that would seek to devour. There's an enemy that would seek to kill and steal and destroy. And as men, as we mature and as we grow in Kindred House, I believe that we're men who are protective of the body, that we have a love for the body of Christ. And because of that, we are protective of that. And so we listen to the Spirit to teach us how to be men who stand as guard, as shepherds in the house and are protective of the body. As wise as they were, they recognized that true wisdom is supernatural wisdom. When they saw him, they bowed, and when they saw him, they used their all of their intellectual wisdom, all of their natural wisdom, and they bowed and they came under the wisdom of a person who is Christ. This is what I believe wise men do. This is what I believe wise men are. And by wisdom, a house is built. And my hope is for us, for the wisdom of my life, of your life, of the families that are represented here, but also the household of faith that we are a part of, that is built on wisdom. And these are just some of the characteristics of what wise men do. I've heard it once said that you do what you do because of how you think of you. And someone said that you do what you do because of how you think of you. And that is, if you can think of yourself as a wise man, and if you can embrace that identity, then when it comes to the question of what type of person am I, when you ask yourself that question, you can say, no, I am a wise man. I'm a man who walks in wisdom. I'm a man who the Lord is building the house of my life. And because of that, I'm going to walk in wisdom. I'm going to walk in understanding. And so that when we go to make decisions and we think, okay, this decision has to be made, we ask ourselves the question, what kind of man am I? And the answer is, I'm a wise man. So then the next question is, so what does a wise man do in this situation? How does a wise man conduct his Monday, his Tuesday, his Wednesday? How does a wise man conduct his time, his attention, his resources? How does a wise man conduct himself in the world, in the church? What does a wise man do? And I want to understand what a wise man does, because that's who I am and that's who you are. And if we cannot modify our behavior. We can't change our behavior if we haven't changed our identity, because our behavior comes from a place of identity. And if we can recognize that this is who God's made us, God is making us and has made us wise men. And because he's made us wise men, we do what wise men do. And we live like wise men live. It's a pleasure to be a builder of the house alongside you men. Most of you I know personally, and it's a privilege to walk alongside you, to be co-laborers, to be fellow builders of the house of our individual lives. And I trust that iron will sharpen iron, especially as we look to strengthen our relationship as men. I trust that we will be stronger because we're together, because God has joined us together. I'm looking forward to these next number of months, and looking forward to the fruit of that, of us being intentional about being homes on purpose, being men on purpose, what it means to be husbands and fathers on purpose. So I'm looking forward to this journey with you. Thank you for taking the time with me, you group of wise men. And so we'll see you next time.